And the colonel goes into a little office about 6 by 6, and there's a phone there, two phones, a red phone and a black phone, and he picks up the black phone and he puts it up to his ear, makes his dial to whoever he went, Sac Omaha probably. He comes back out and his face is as white as my shirt. And he said, "Gentlemen, we are in DEFCON 2. That means defense communications. The next word that we get, we launch." He said, "Site commanders, seal your holds. Aircraft commanders, launch your aircraft." At that point in time, we were 14 and a half minutes from liftoff. We sat that way for 8 solid days. And they would let us in and out as they needed us, but normally we sat in the office and played cards because there was nothing for us to do. We were civilians. In the meantime, the American public has known that we have set up they didn't call it a blockade because a blockade is an act of war. They called it a quarantine. And we said, okay, we put a ring of ships around Cuba. Russia knows that we've got, I know of at least 7 weapons that were aimed right down the Kremlin smokestack. Every one of them was aimed, and I knew where they were to go because I was there. They went into the city of Moscow. 7 20-megaton bombs. Now, Khrushchev didn't want any of this. So, but they couldn't back down. I mean, he had his pride. So we put this ring of ships around Cuba. And if your father remembers it, if he was living in Florida at the time,
Probably granddaddy's daddy.
you could have walked on the top of ships on the intercoastal waterway down through Titusville and Miami and Jacksonville all the way to the Keys. The highways were solid, sealed off on the way south. Troops going down there by the tens of thousands. And guess what? Guess who made the suggestion that finally finished? It was Kennedy. Kennedy said, because they said, hey, you sink one of them ships, we launch. My wife was instructed, if she heard them lift out on that desert out there, she had either 2 time periods, one, 30 minutes if we launched first before they seen us and started back, or 15 minutes if they launched first. And I loaded the Jeep, I put my rifles and my food. And she comes out and said, hey, y'all going deer hunting? And I said, no, we're not going deer hunting, but you're going to those mountains. I'm going back to work. If you hear them lift off, you throw them kids in that Jeep and you get over that hill. But, of course, it didn't happen. But anyway, back to what Kennedy told him. He said, I tell you what we'll do. He said, I'll take those weapons out of Turkey if you'll take those out of Cuba. And Castro back to the wall. And he said, not Castro, he wasn't even involved hardly. It was his country, but it was Khrushchev. Anyway, when the ships left, we didn't board their ships. They uncovered the weapons where we could see them. We didn't set any troops. Nobody touched anybody. And we sat there in that situation now for how many years? It's the Cold War. It's been over for.
Oh, well, I don't know that it is over personally, but
But anyway, now that's the story
as far as Cuba's
of the closest this world ever came to being wiped out since Noah.
Now, were you in the command center?
No, I was in the, I wasn't in the command center was at,
I'm just asking things he meant to ask you.
yeah, the command center was at,
I'm at
you know,
each
out,
station.
I don't know, what's the name of that? I can't even remember the state now, central part of the United States.
Colorado?
No, it doesn't come up, yeah, okay, yeah. But, we didn't, not having satellites in those days,
What was your point of view on the Cuban Missile Crisis? Your personal opinion?
I was scared. I felt that if we launched, we would take them out. I mean, there's no doubt about it. There's a book out you might like to read that was written about the same time. And the town was Mount Dora. And the name of the book is Alas Babylon. You
Miss,
ever heard of it?
Miss Flores told us about that.
Have you read it?
No. We read 13 Days by Robert Kennedy.
Yeah. Anyway, Alas Babylon pretty accurately describes what would happen if what was about to happen actually, well, they went ahead and did it. But it didn't happen. Anyway, back in those days, I don't think there's anything in here. Everybody, this is your age stuff. This is, no, you don't want that. That's a company report. This is the old missile range that we used to test weapons. We started from here, and every one of those spots that you see down through there is a communication site, and they all had radar. And all of the weapons or the payloads would land somewhere along that line. And there was a lot of intrigue that went along. For instance, there was a woman who was a newspaper reporter, and she asked the general running the base out here. People had seen a Russian submarine laying out here, and what that Russian submarine was doing, he'd come up with a telescope, and he had what they call an impact predictor, and he could tell by the arc and the speed where it would land. And they had fishing boats down in here, and they were beating us to our payloads. And so if it got off, we had to put explosives on our payloads to make it blow up and sink to keep the Russians from getting it. So Dorothy Kilgallen, she was a investigative reporter, fine one, and she said, General, what about this Russian submarine out there? And he said, wow, he said, I don't know what they could see from out there. They couldn't see from the hotel in Cocoa Beach, but it got under his skin. And a few days later, we were up on the gantry working, and we look out there, and there's an aircraft carrier out there. Hey, look at that carrier. Wonder what he's doing out here. Well, it's hard to hide an aircraft carrier. Well, he's out there just doing practice runs, and lo and behold, it was headed for Jacksonville. It had hit something, probably a whale. Well, it went to Jacksonville, and they sent divers down. They decided they'd have to go back to Norfolk and dry dock. And the only thing about it was, it never had any more submarine problems. They had caught him in that shallow water out there and rolled him over. And those things happened during wartime. Hey, we were in Cold War. Here's that is what happened when they escaped. If you remember, the shuttle didn't have an escape system. And the shuttle not having an escape system, a lot of people died because they lost 2 of them. Back in the old days, we had an escape system. And this is all the astronauts, and these are some of the pictures of the main ones. And Go ahead. Here's something. Now this is basically what the Titan 1 weapon looked like.
Yeah, let them they take pictures
Yeah.
better when they lay down.
What that?
We'll move this one out of the way. That way you don't have it back on the back.
This portion is the weapon, and this is for re-entry, so that it can get in, and it burns away when what they call an ablative surface. And this is a countdown on the same. That's the one that I tech repped on. Here's the one that you might like. Before we had rockets that we could get to 7,000 miles or what we needed out of them, I was working for North American, and I was on this program. This is what they call, notice how it looks like the shuttle? Werner von Braun said it'd never fly, said it'd break up when it turned over. Well, we proved it would fly. But this bottom half, leaving the pad here, was the old V2. Germans that shot into London. And it was renamed later the Thor. Well, we couldn't call it the Thor, even though we built some of them, but we call it the G-26, was the booster for the Navajo. And we had a lot of trouble with, and as soon as the first Sputnik was launched, air breathers disappeared. All the contracts were canceled. Then we got another contract, and what we were doing, since it flew at 1,700 miles an hour, it was a test bed. We used it as a test bed, and we had a lot of trouble launching them, and it was called, nicknamed the Never Go Navajo. And that's me taking one into the test area. If you notice, these are official, but they've been declassified. And here's what they do aboard ship in recovery. They pick up a piece, they put people in the water, they get their cranes out. Now this is Apollo. I was in the control room on the Apollo. I was the EPS engineer, electrical power systems. And NASA didn't take control of the Apollo until after liftoff. And we took it till it cleared the top of the tower at the Cape, and then Houston took it from there. And one of the companies, I think Raytheon, put this out as a little, to show you what happens in sequence.
This is great, but you need to go back to Cuba. I'm sorry.
Back to what?
Cuba.
All right,
The
what do you want to
kids.
know in Cuba?
I just don't want,
Oh, yeah, I understand what you're saying. That's where I got you here, because I'm an old man.
because I want you to be able to make your meeting on time. What he's got here is all kinds of
Okay.
accommodations and stuff, just
All
to
right.
let you know. But go ahead, questions
Yeah, I'm
about
not going any
Cuba.
further with this. You said you wanted to see the picture.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, go ahead.
How did you feel about the Berlin Wall coming down?
What do you,
What again?
How did you feel about the Berlin Wall?
Berlin Wall. What was
Coming
your feeling about what when it came down, or the whole wall in general?
When it came down?
Okay, when it came down.
well, it had to happen eventually, because in order for Europe to move, Germany had to reunite. And it's an indication of we won. Now, if you want to get into walls, is that the only wall you want to know about? Okay. The Berlin Wall was indicative of a system that was trying to hold people there, and the Berlin Wall was ineffective. Whenever we had the Berlin airlift, we hauled coal into those people and everything, because Russia didn't want